Before I start the video, as a quick reminder, check out my links down below to help support the channel. I am now in partnership with Baron of Dice. They have some awesome TCG accessories like playmats, deck boxes, and dice. And if you want to level up your setup, it is the perfect way to do so. And if you want to support the channel directly and get some sweet perks, consider joining the Patreon. If you want to get early access to videos or even some deck help, Patreon is where it's at. And so without further ado, let's get back into the video. The Spider-Verse has officially swung into Magic the Gathering, and these commanders are pretty wild. I know not a lot of people are excited about this set, but I honestly like it a lot.
You serious?
I grew up as a Spider-Man fan, and seeing a lot of these come to life in Magic the Gathering is pretty cool. So in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the top 10 Spider-Man commanders, ranking them from the web-slinging heroes to the sinister villains, and so let's get right into it.
Now dig on this.
Before we dive into the countdown, I did want to give you a couple honorable mentions that didn't quite make the top 10, but I still wanted to give them a nod. First up is Scarlet Spyler Ben Riley. I like this because its web-slinging ability is pretty cheap. You return a big creature from the battlefield to your hand and get that many counters equal to the CMC. So you have a lot of high CMC creatures that can be reduced with certain effects. Switch them out for Scarlet Spider, and Scarlet Spider gets extra huge. This could be great in a Gruul ETB theme. If you have something like Kogla, you bounce it right to your hand and then recast it later, remove another threat. I just think it's a pretty neat design. Another honorable mention would be Superior Spider-Man, and this is a really cool storyline in Spider-Man. Dr. Octavius put his mind into Peter's body, and of course that is perfectly explained in this card. He basically becomes a clone of a creature in a graveyard. You could go into a mill theme, milling everybody including yourself, finding the best creatures to copy, and if there's a better creature later on that you want to copy, you could use some flicker spells to make him a copy of another creature. This is also a really cool storyline. Like I mentioned previously, there was a part in there that just fascinated me about Spider-Man. Superior Spider-Man punched the jaw off a scorpion, and then Dr. Octavius had the realization that Spider-Man has been holding his punches this whole time against every opponent, which is just really cool and just speaks to Spider-Man's character because we really don't know how strong he is. Besides that point, those are some honorable mentions. Now I wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of the list and talk about 10 commanders that I feel like are deserving on the top spots. So let's go to number 10. And we're kicking off this list with Anti-Venom Horrifying Healer. He's like Venom's healthier yoga practicing cousin. He is a pretty strong commander, however he's limited compared to the others in the list. Though don't get me wrong, having a reanimation on a creature, all the while buffing itself up when it gets damaged, is quite strong. Use some pariah effects so nobody wants to swing into you because you'll just get that many more counters. You could also add that one space laser from Edge of Eternities where it deals 100 damage to a target creature. You could just target your own creature and make your opponents scream for mercy. I also love the art of this Anti-Venom. It's just so cool with the greens and whites, and I just like it a lot. But let's move down to the list and talk about the spot Living Portal. The spot is chaotic, unpredictable, and sometimes just weird. He can be pretty good removal in some circumstances, exiling a non-land permanent on the battlefield or even in the graveyard. That could also be a benefit for you because if you sacrifice him or if he just dies, you can just return the exiled cards to their owner's hands so that you could reuse them over again. This seems more of like a fun removal commander if anything else, and I can't wait to see what people brew with it. But now let's move on to number 8, and that would be Gwenem Remorseless. Do you love Bolas' Citadel? Well, you kind of get a little bit of a worse version. It is pretty brutal though. You want to swing in with Gwenem so that you could cast spells from the top of your library and losing life in the process, but that is the one downside. Unless you have a Lightning Greaves, you're just begging for it to be removed on the battlefield right away. So it's a little worse than Bolas' Citadel, but then again, it's in the command zone, so it can be quite powerful in that aspect. She's strong, but she feels more like a niche commander. She also does have lifelink, so you may want to consider a Voltron strategy, so that way you could buff her up, gain more life, so that you could just cast more spells later on. So Gwenem seems very powerful, but again, can be a removal magnet, so that's why I had it at this placement. So let's move down the list and talk about number 7 with Dr. Octopus, the Master Planner. He's the Tentacle Daddy, and he's quite powerful as a villain's commander. Even though he is quite expensive at 7 CMC, you may want to put him in the 99 of some decks, but as a commander itself, it's actually quite strong. He buffs up all your villains, giving them +2/+2, and giving you a maximum hand size of 8. And at the beginning of your end step, if you have fewer than 8 cards in hand, draw the many cards equal to the difference. So that's why I really like this commander. You want to just cast a lot of spells, empty your hand, and then refill it again to make it up to 8. This is like a mini Jin-Gitaxias in a way, besides giving the negative effect to your opponents. Plus, seriously, don't discount the fact that other villains you control get +2/+2. You run a bunch of villains in this deck, and they all kind of synergize with Dr. Octopus. Some of them have that madness ability, or some of them want to be in the graveyard so that you can exile them to get some sort of value. So Dr. Octopus, the Master Planner, is quite cool and a very interesting commander. But again, I feel like it's probably probably better than the 99, and so that's why it's at this part of the list. But things are going to get a little bit more cosmic at number 6, and we're going to talk about, well, the Cosmic Spider-Man. This is another one of those commanders like Go Shintai, or even that one mirror from Dominaria United, where a specific niche type of creatures fit into that deck, and because they're 5 color, you can put any of those in the deck too, especially within this set. But with the Cosmic Spider-Man, this is basically just a Chroma's Will for all your spiders. He gives them all sorts of keyword texts, so that way you could just go for the victory. So it's basically a win con in the command zone, and that's really it. I was going to have this a little bit lower in the list, probably at like number 10, just because I didn't necessarily care for the type of strategy it's doing. It's pretty generic, but then again, it is quite powerful as a Spider-Man commander. This absolutely screams Battle Cruiser Commander. You drop him and suddenly it's like, oh, we're not playing EDH anymore because the table's already dead. So again, it's pretty generic, but still quite powerful. But let's move on to number 5, and that would be Miles Morales / the Ultimate Spider-Man. This brings the speed, energy, and a really fun playstyle. This commander feels true to his character. He's versatile, flashy, and a real fan favorite. He's all about the 1/1 counters. And spoiler alert, a lot of these flip cards are quite powerful, and so a lot of them are in this list coming forward. But this one is pretty good because he can protect himself, giving hexproof, which is flavorful because he turns invisible. And also the fact that you could double the number of each kind of counter on each spider and each legendary creature you control can be pretty brutal. Of course, it's only an attack trigger, but then again, if you go into those extra combats, you can keep doubling the counters and really go to town and potentially win the game. Into the Spider-Verse is one of my favorite Spider-Man movies, and Miles Morales is obviously the clear standout of that movie, along with Gwen Stacy. So of course, I had to put Miles Morales on this list. But let's move on to another villain at number 4, and that would be Mr. Negative, and this guy's ability is crazy. He turns drawbacks into advantages and flipping the game on its head, and the fact that he has a enters the battlefield trigger means that you could reuse his ability over and over again with Panharmonicon effects and flicker effects, switching life totals back and forth, and you don't really know when you or your opponents are going to die because of the flipping life totals over and over again, and getting card draw off of it is quite powerful too, depending on how much life you're giving to your opponents. So this one is a pretty cool design, very similar to Axis of Mortality, one of my favorite cards I like to utilize in Standard a long time ago, not because it was any good, but because it was fun. But now we are going to go over to the top 3, and all these are going to be flip cards. Each of these cards are quite powerful and unique at what they're doing. So number 3 would be Peter Parker / the Amazing Spider-Man. I was going to have this higher, but the fact that the other 2 commanders ahead have really cool designs, I thought Peter Parker would be good at number 3. So you can't have Spider-Man without, well, Spider-Man. Peter Parker is amazing, getting you a creature on the battlefield, but of course the main draw to this card is the backside. Giving legendary creatures in your hand web slinging is quite insane, cheating them only for 3 mana. Of course they're in banned color combination, but still, returning a tapped creature from the battlefield to your hand and replacing it with an even bigger creature can be absolutely brutal. So I do really love the balance of this card. It's pretty versatile and strong about in any build. He's not super flashy though, but then again, he can be an absolute menace to the game. But now let's go over to number 2. There's plenty of villains. In the Rogues Gallery, you have Spider-Man, but nobody competes with him quite like Norman Osborn / the Green Goblin. He's probably the main antagonist of the entire series. Of course, it depends on which comics or which movies you're looking at, but the Green Goblin is a standout, at least for me. He is pure chaos, pure evil, and honestly gives you pure value. He really does it all. On the front side, you could go into a Voltron strategy because he has unblockable, he connives, he gets bigger, and on the back side, he is extremely pushed and strong. You could go into wheel strategies, self-discard strategies, and casting spells that you discarded for at a cheap rate, reducing their cost by 2. Seriously, the Green Goblin is absolutely a nightmare. He could go into CDH territory, at least in my opinion, high powered, or he could go into lower bracket tiers. I already made a deck tech around him in a more high powered setting. I'm also going to make him in a bracket 1 territory, focusing only on villains. That will be coming out probably later in the next week or so definitely stay tuned. But now let's talk about the number 1 commander, and it has to be none other than Morbius.
It's Morbin time.
Okay, maybe absolutely not. The real number 1 choice is, of course, Eddie Brock / Venom the Lethal Protector. This is doing it all for me. Eddie Brock is kind of generic. He has the ETB of returning a creature with 1 CMC. That's fine, but of course we really like it for the backside. You attack, you draw cards by sacrificing another creature, and you cheat creatures onto the battlefield. What's not to love about it? It's one of my favorite things to do in Magic the Gathering. I just had a sudden realization when I was making this video. I have like 2 other decks that do the same kind of concept. Gish Aslan's Avatar, when you swing in and connect, you get a bunch of dinosaurs on the battlefield. The same applies for a Rennie. You swing in, get a dragon onto the battlefield, and now since I've made Venom in paper, you swing in, sacrifice a creature, and cheat something into the battlefield. So of course this is probably a little bit of a bias because of that, and also Venom is one of my favorite characters in Marvel. I had to give him the #1 spot. He's flavor powerful, and he looks like a real fun time. He's the kind of commander that makes the whole table go, yeah, that's pretty terrifying, and let's be honest, he is an absolute slam dunk. So that is my entire list of the top 10 Spider-Man commanders in Magic the Gathering. But now I wanted to hear from you, who is your favorite? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, if you can, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.